Hi everyone, welcome to another Hasura community call this time of the month of May. I'm very happy that so many people could join, and let's get quickly over the agenda. So as usual, we first have an update from our side. Tanmai will give a quick product update as to what features you can try out and about the next release. Then Praveen will show us use cases for schedule triggers, followed by Tiru, who will do a demo on remote joins. And then Gavin will show us, we're all used to using Hasura with the UI, like with the console, and he will show us how we can use Hasura purely with TypeScript. Very exciting. Then I will give an update on HasuraCon, which will be happening in a week from today, and some quick updates on open source contributions where we have new issues that we would love your help on. And as usual, we'll have another community demo. I always love the community demos. Avi Moondra will show us how he used actions in implementing a game called Fishbowl Game. So this is also very exciting. You shouldn't miss this. Yes, if Tanmai, if you're ready, you can go next. I will stop sharing.
Absolutely. I'll just share my screen. Is my audio okay?
Yes.
All right. I hope you folks can see me. I am over the moon, if you can see behind me, for these 1.3 updates, and the idea is, and that's because we've had some two absolutely killer things that have just gotten merged to master. So we'll be releasing 1.3 beta soon. With 1.3, we were planning to hopefully have the 1.3 beta released, maybe late last week or early this week. But it looks like we should be out on Friday, coming Thursday or Friday as a beta release. The three main things that we're targeting with this release are relay, schedule triggers, and remote joins. I've used acronyms that we usually use internally, STs and RJs. And with Praveen and Tiru are going to talk to you about schedule triggers and remote joins. Both of them are extremely exciting. And I think they kind of further this theme that we've had of Hasura kind of taking away the stateful problems or the stateful work that you usually have on the backend, right? So whenever you're building a backend, your backend has like stateful stuff and stateless stuff. And what Hasura has been doing has been gradually kind of eating into the stateful portions so that the code you write or the things that you do can be stateless. And stateless means that things become kind of easy to manage. And so that kind of fits into our theme, especially with schedule triggers, which Praveen will talk about. The kind of other non-functional updates almost to that will land in 1.3. We've just about finished moving to GHC 8.810. And one of the cool things about the Haskell runtime, GHC is the Haskell runtime, and one of the cool things about the 810 Haskell runtime is that it features a concurrent non-moving garbage collector, which has a tremendously positive impact on the P99s, the P95s, and the latency fluctuations go down massively. And this is amazing. This is one of those things where Haskell is far ahead of other garbage collected languages, and that kind of makes it a massive joy to keep kind of programming in Haskell and building things in Haskell, and keep kind of leveraging these performance benefits that are happening under the surface. So that's going to be amazing. We've already shipped a few versions out to a few of our users who've been running kind of at scale to see what the impact has been, and the impact has been pretty positive. It's also resolved a few of the persistent memory issues that were occasionally cropping up, so that's been great as well. Two other things that have happened are there's been a good performance. There's been a solid performance update to the subscription subsystem that Vamshi landed a week ago, and that is going to be released in 1.3 as well. Again, something that we've been testing out with a few of our users, and things look pretty good. We've also upgraded the authorization test suite. We had a fairly nasty security bug that we patched with 1.2.1. If everybody on this call, I do encourage you to please check out the Hasura security announcement mailing list please do subscribe to that. It's the first time that we've had to use it, but then when we used it, we realized that there's not too many people subscribed to it. But we sent out emails and Discord messages and announcements to whoever we were connected with, of course. But please do subscribe to that mailing list so that you stay up to date for any critical product and security updates, and that'll be useful. But one of the things that did come out from that was that we're going to work fairly, that we've enhanced our test suite a fair bit. So we had very good functional tests. So we've had very good kind of functional tests for testing the authorization system, but we've not had good negative tests. And what we've been doing is been ramping up the negative tests to make sure that we can simulate malicious users and stuff like that. And so we're doing that. We'll also be announcing a bug bounty program we're kind of just choosing our vendor, but it might be something like HackerOne. So we're announcing our bug bounty program on HackerOne soon as well. And there's a whole slew of announcements that are going to happen for HasuraCon that are going to be absolutely amazing. This should be hopefully be one of them. All right, so I'll quickly give you an update on the relay side. If we are good to we're good to start trying out all those of you who use Relay or are excited about Relay. You're good to start using Relay and start trying it out. You should see the build on the pull request. It should get merged in a day or two, and for the 1.3 beta release. But you can already start trying it out. It doesn't require any kind of serious updates. I'll just do a quick demo and show you what that looks like. So I have a local setup running. This is the pull request 4458. So that's the pull request on which you'll see the latest Docker images. And so I have a Docker image for testing that out, and I'm running this. Let me just see if I am running this. Cool. So I'm running this, and let's go to localhost 8080. I think I have it here. Yep. And so what you'll see is you'll see a little toggle that toggles this to a relay endpoint or to a simplified GraphQL endpoint. We might change the URL and stuff a little bit as we move from beta to stable, but nothing will seriously change. So for example, I can just switch this to the relay endpoint, and that becomes the relay endpoint that I can use for my relay client. It does not affect the existing GraphQL endpoint that you have at all. So you can incrementally kind of move to or try relay out as well, and it'll give us some time also for relay for the relay API to kind of stabilize and become as feature rich as the normal GraphQL endpoint is. Although most features have been ported over, some features that Hasura implements are particularly interesting. Things that are usually very hard to do, like nested ordering, like ordering a parent based on a nested property of a child, and those kinds of things become a little bit harder to generate the SQL for when it comes to relay. That's kind of why it's taken us a while, but mostly you'll see a good feature compatibility, and so you can try out the relay endpoint. I have the Chinook database here, so let me just show you a few quick examples of things that you can start trying out. So let's say I have artists, and I want to fetch ID and name and maybe the first 10. Let's fetch the name. ID and name here, and then we can also fetch information about whether the next page is available and the next cursor. So this kind of makes sure that the pagination that you're doing is automatically optimized. Sometimes, like depending on what you're doing, limit and offset usually is not a good way to paginate through large records. And so usually when you're paginating through large systems, you want to be able to paginate through a combination of limit and an order clause and a where clause. So you say something like, order by ID, limit 10, and then you fetch the first 10, and then if you want to fetch the next 10, you do where ID greater than 10 instead of doing offset 10. And that is the nature of most databases. Actually, I think almost all databases is that normal limit and offset pagination is actually very time consuming. So here I'm running this query. I get the information that the next page, there is a next page, and then I can just take this cursor value, and then I can just do a after. So I can do first 10 and then give me an after this cursor. And so then I'll get the next 10 values, right? And that's nice. And Relay has a lot of automation so that these pagination components are easy to build as well. The other nice thing about Relay is that you'll notice the node interface spec. So what I can do is I can pick up a random ID of any element anywhere, right? So everybody has globally unique IDs. So you'll see that these IDs are not actually now mapped to IDs as they are in the database. Like for example, the database has integer IDs. I can take these IDs and I can make a query to fetch a node that has a particular ID. And I know this is an artist, for example. So let me go and fetch some artist data. And so if I say node ID is this, I can basically fetch that data, right? And this is nice. This is a really nice property of Relay. It might seem like it's not useful, but in practice, it's very, very useful for a few things. For example, especially if you're using fragments, you might have like an entire UI that has lots of different fragments. And then one of those fragments needs to update, right? So let's say you have a product page on an e-commerce website and you have product description, product reviews. Now you have product reviews and you want to load the next 10 product reviews, or you have a product description and you want to switch the translation into something else, right? So that's kind of a part of your larger query, and you want to refresh a part of your large query without refreshing the whole query. So what Relay lets you do quite easily, and this is something that you would do yourself whether or not you were using Relay, is that if you have something like a node spec, what you can do is you can make a query for that kind of particular item that you have somewhere deep in the component, in the UI component tree, and just fetch the data for that ID, right? And that automation becomes really convenient. And then you can just fetch that and you can display that. So this is something that you can do with Hasura already with GraphQL today, because Hasura exposes resolvers at the top level and at the nested level already. So this is possible to do with Apollo and Hasura today, or with any other GraphQL client. But with Relay, there's a little bit of automation that makes stuff like this convenient. So do take Relay for a spin. The pull request is 4458. Let me see if that's here. Um, and you'll see updates coming in over the next few days as we kind of wrap up the review here. I think the review is just going to start for this tomorrow. And then you can just pick up the latest Docker image and try it out, point it to your existing database, and give us feedback on what's working, what's not working, and stuff like that. One of the biggest items that we have to do is kind of make sure that we'll update the inflection. We'll be adding a camel casing inflection system in 1.4, so that will automatically update the Relay GraphQL API that we have in the 1.4 release. But that's it from my side. And over to Marion, and I think over to Marion to take this forward. All right.
Thank you, Tanmai. So next up would be Praveen with schedule triggers.
Yep. I'm just sharing the screen. All right. Yeah, I have like a few updates to show for schedule triggers. We've basically categorized schedule triggers into cron triggers and one-off scheduled events. I think the last community call, Rishi showed a demo where you can create a cron trigger, and so now the category is basically more specific. So one-off scheduled events, you can use it to schedule through the API calls, and cron triggers is something that you can declaratively configure and run periodically for certain use cases, right? So the important thing to notice is that schedule triggers, the state is managed by Hasura for you. So you don't need to worry about managing this event queue. So you just basically declaratively configure events to be executed on a particular time, and Hasura will take care of executing it for you with all the retry config and timeout and so on, right? And for metadata, cron triggers will be typically part of your metadata because it's a recurring event and you want to maintain this data and state as part of your version control, right? So this will usually be part of your metadata. And for one-off scheduled events, it's most likely a temporary state, which will not be useful for you after the event has been executed. So it can be ignored to be part of the metadata, right? So those are the clear distinctions between the type of triggers. The typical use cases for triggers, like for example, the cron triggers is just basically like daily reporting, automated newsletters, and so on, whichever happens on a periodic basis, right? For a one-off scheduled event, which is like a more a specific use case driven trigger, right? It's basically like I want to do a particular task at a future time, but I want to do it only once, and I don't want to repeat that same, right? So what I'll do is like, for example, I want to schedule a tweet for a given date, and I want to do it only once. Obviously, I don't want to repeat the same task, right? And similarly, I want to send an email to a user after a week after placing an order, right? So these are some use cases which are typically part of your application. And managing this state of just executing once or just executing multiple times on a particular time interval is something that is pretty difficult to manage generally, right? So, so I'm just going to show you a quick demo of doing both cron triggers and one of scheduled event in an existing app. So I have a simple e-commerce schema, the typical products and users and orders, right? My use case is that I have orders and I want to like send an email on a daily basis for the admins to know what the report of the yesterday's order value and order count looks like, right? So I've created a view called daily orders, which will have the count of the orders on a given day, right? Now, as an admin, I would just want to trigger an email on a daily basis to get the value of the orders, right? So I'll go to events. I'll configure a cron trigger. I'm going to name this as daily reports. And I have a webhook. Let me just configure the webhook. Which is running on my local machine. I'm going to say order report, right? So we can configure a cron schedule so that we can say on what interval this has to be executed, right? So my use case is basically I want to run it on every midnight so that at midnight this webhook will be executed and I'll probably get an email, right? I don't need a payload. This will probably be an empty payload, right? So in advanced configuration, you can see that you can configure the retry rules. If something fails, how long does Hasura need to retry to your server? If the server is down and whatnot, right? And the timeout, basically, if your API is taking a lot of time, you'll basically configure a higher time interval, right? And this is the setting that I was talking about previously. You will basically include this trigger in Hasura metadata. So in case you're testing this on your staging environment and you want to move this to production, if this is part of your metadata, you can just basically apply the migrations and metadata and then carry it on to your production app, right? So that's mostly it. So I've just created this order report webhook. If I go to pending events and I just sort it by scheduled time, I can see that all the events for the next few days have been already scheduled. So like for tomorrow and the coming days, right? On a particular time, right? So let me show you the code snippet for the order reports. Basically, yeah, I'll just show you the query for daily reports. I'm going to say daily orders, and I need the date and count value, right? So yeah, I need to also remove this. Yeah, so this is just the data that I want to know, and based on the number of count, I just want to send the email to the number of people who have subscribed to this, right? So I've just declared a query accepting the date argument as a variable, and because this is a daily report, I'm just getting yesterday's date, and then I'm just sending it as a variable, and I'm just passing it as passing the admin secret. Do note that all of these are admin APIs, so this will just be accessible only on the server, and you'll be passing the admin secret. And once you have the queries figured out, you will basically send, and once the response is there, you will send an email to your analytics team, whatever, right? So this is a typical use case for a recurring report where you will just run a particular webhook on a periodic interval, right? The second use case, which is an interesting use case, is that you want to define one-off scheduled events. Basically, in the e-commerce scenario, once an order is placed successfully, you want to send the user an email about asking for feedback of the product that they've ordered, right? So this you want to send after a week of placing the order. So the logic for this will be in the create order mutation. We have an action called create order. This is just basically a custom mutation that you've written, and it's been configured for this webhook. So what the logic for this would be that in create order, you will typically do the validations, and you will basically fetch cart items and basically insert into the order table, right? So once all of this is done, finally what we want to do is we want to schedule one event, right? Which will trigger an email. So I want to call an API which will do this. So this is a REST API, which is going to schedule one particular event at a given time, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say schedule event, and this is the request object, right? Here we need to configure a few things, the webhook and the scheduled time and the payload, right? The webhook would basically be my email API. I've already returned the email API here. This is send feedback email, which is a post request. So I'm going to just make use of that. So I'm going to say host.docker.internal 3000/send feedback email, and I need a date to schedule it at a particular time, right? So I'm going to calculate the next week's date so that I can trigger this next week. I'm going to make use of the moment library, and I'm going to add 7 days to it, right? Then I'm going to say next week date, and I'll just format this date into an ISO string. Yep, I'm just missing a double quote here. Yep. On the payload, so I just need the email ID, right? So if you look at this particular endpoint, this accepts an email and sends a SMTP email here, right? I just need to send an email payload, and this will basically come from the email which will be in the order table, right? After the order has been placed, we'll fetch the user information and you'll have some user email coming from the table, right? So this will be prefetched before the schedule happens. Let's just give my email ID right now. And for headers, I don't need to send any specific headers to the custom API. And yeah, so this is the request body that I formed. I just need to make an API call to render this. I'm going to say fetch API. I'm going to say await fetch. So the URL for this will be, if you look at the docs, this is the V1 query. This is not the GraphQL query. This is the V1 query. So I'll make use of localhost 8080 and V1 query. And I need to form the options, which would be the method, which would be post. And I also need to send the body, which would be JSON stringified version of the schedule event. And I also probably need to send the headers, which should be the admin secret, because this is the admin only API, right? So my fetch API code is fine. So I'll just need to get the JSON data back. So I'm going to say await fetch API .json. I'm just going to console this. And finally, I'm going to return some data to the custom mutation, which will be like a simple Boolean, success true, right? So when this create order custom mutation is called, once all the validations and whatever is done, we finally actually schedule an event by calling this API in our action code, right? So now let's test this by going to create order mutation. So let's just call the mutation create order, and I'll just get back to success data. Now I should see some one-off scheduled event in the pending events, and we can see that there is a scheduled event on June 3. We can do another test by just adding a different day. We can just add one day to this and maybe make another mutation. And I'll just go to one-off scheduled events. And so May 28th. So I just added one more day, and another email has been scheduled, right? So this will execute only once, and that's it. And that's the life cycle of this particular event. And once it's processed, you will see it over here. And that's it. And so you don't need to manage this state anywhere. You don't need to have this in your metadata and your migrations. You can basically call this API and give your configuration for your webhook and the scheduled time, and you're done with a one-off event, right? Yep, that's mostly it from my demo.
Thank you, Praveen. So now we'll have a tiny change of plans, but we're flexible here. So Gavin will go next with Hasura without the UI, and then we'll have the remote joins demo. Gavin, if you're ready, you can go. Gavin?
Gavin, are you on mute? Gavin, just letting you know that you're on mute.
Okay, otherwise I can go
maybe
next.
He thought he was next. Maybe he wasn't aware of the sudden change in plans. But Marion, I can go next if my audio is clear.
Okay, it's clear, yes. Perfect.
Okay, so we're back to the original plan, and I'll start sharing my screen. There you go. So hey folks, so just a forewarning, if my audio goes bad or my screen is not clearly visible, it's because I'm having a power cut because of the showers in Bangalore. So if that happens, then Tanmai will take over. So yeah, that's just a warning. So yeah, so remote joins has finally been merged. It was in the queue for a long time, and very fortunately, just today it's been merged, which means that in the next version 1.3 release, this would definitely be part of the release. And along with, so now we are just waiting for relay, and after that we'll have version 1.3 beta maybe this Friday. So what is remote joins? Because we have not done a demo on remote joins on the community call, we'll start fresh and we'll talk about what it enables and what kind of power the user actually gets by adding remote schemas and doing remote joins. So here I have deployed my app on Heroku, and I have created a table called users, which is a very simple table. It has an ID and it has an email. And I have also added a remote schema here. And this is the remote schema for which interfaces with auth0. So I've deployed it on Glitch. If you want to see, this is the code. It's a very simple Express app, and it basically takes an auth0 admin token and publishes a small auth0 remote schema. So this is what I've added here. So to see what all we have here in our schema, we can look at the docs here, or we can look at Explorer, which is I think better. So we have auth0 here. It takes auth0 ID and email. and you can get some info here. Maybe let's just try it, right? Like, for example, auth0 email. Let me put here Hasura.io, and we can get a lot of details, maybe the name as well. So we can see that we get the data from the remote schema. None of this is in the tables, and that is what remote schemas are for. But now suppose you already have a table called users and it has an email, and you actually want to fetch the data together. You want to fetch the table data as well as fetch the auth0 data through the remote schema. And the easiest and the nicest API that you can use for that is to create a relationship, just like you would create a relationship with another table. You can create a relationship with the remote schema field. And that's what we'll do here. Let's call the relationship name auth0 profile. And we have to choose the remote schema. And here we get the option to like make the mapping. What are the foreign keys in some sense, or what are the join parameters? So I'm going to use email as the join key, and I want the email to come from the column called email of this table. I'm on this table, right? And I can create that. And now if I get my users, so ID and email is what we had in the table already. So this was already there. But I also have the auth0 profile field here, and I can get the information for that, right? I can get the user ID as well. So there you go. So basically we have joined the data into a single GraphQL API, and all the implementation detail of making the remote call and all that is kind of hidden from the user. So it's in a single call you get all the data required. Now we can make it even more interesting. What we can actually do, and this will be the part of probably the next release, the next major release, is we can actually hide the auth0 remote schema completely, so that you can only access the auth0 profile through the user's relationship. And then what you could do is actually set permissions also. For example, if I have set a permission like select with custom check, email equal to Hasura user ID. Right. And if I use the role user, Hasura, okay, I called it user ID. Then I only get my information. So without this, I would have got the entire information. So basically the permission kind of acts on the remote schema call as well, because you will only join with the tables or the rows that you have access to, and you will get the remote objects for only those authenticated rows. So this is basically remote joins, and very happy to say that it's been merged and it will be available for use in the next release. And yeah, so that was the demo. Apart from this, there are a few things that are in the roadmap that I would like to share related to remote schemas, which is that the first thing is something that I already mentioned, which is that you will have remote schema permissions, with which like you can, with your role-based access that you have for tables, you can actually use that on the remote fields as well. Maybe you want to hide all the fields or not give access to any fields for role user, or maybe give access to only few fields. So those things will be possible. And the second thing is, since you are able to do table to remote schema join, it's natural that you might want to do remote schema to remote schema join, or remote schema to table join, which is very similar to what you can do with actions and relationships on actions, except the underlying underlying interface is different. In Actions, you use REST, but with remote schemas, you use GraphQL. So all these data sources, all these interfaces, and all these data sources kind of will become unified, and you can make relationships across all of them, and have all these kind of capabilities and power in a very nice API. So that is what we are going to aim for in the next releases, and hopefully you'll like it. And if you have any feedback, please feel free to share that with us as well. Thank you.
Just to add
Thank
to
you,
that,
Tiru.
as soon as this remote joins, will be making it to 1.3, and then we'll have 1.3 Pro as well for those of you who are on Hasura Pro, and then that should be out about a week after 1.3 is out as well.
Nice, thank you. So now Gavin, I think he's back.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
reals this time. Okay, sorry, my UI froze.
Gavin, your audio is a little bit low.
Is that better?
Yes, this is better, I think.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So can everybody see?
Yes.
Okay. So one of the things that I've been working on the past little while is these strongly typed metadata SDKs for Hasura. So kind of the backstory behind it is that interaction with Hasura is primarily UI driven. And we do have REST APIs, right? And the CLI accepts like YAML and JSON. But like the developer experience behind these interactions, it doesn't really have a lot of tooling. So the idea was to kind of create these new typed SDKs with commonly used utility functions that you might need in major languages, as well as JSON schemas. And the cool thing about doing this is that when you're writing metadata in whatever your favorite language is, in this demo we're going to use TypeScript, you get to have things like IntelliSense and like real-time linting when you're writing in your IDE. So you can see here, like I pass 1 as my schema, and it's like, hey, don't do that. That's not a string. Or that my foreign key constraint on object is missing properties, and you can see the autocomplete there. At a high level, how this works is that we use something called QuickType, which allows you to just convert different types of data formats to other languages. And so what I want to do is basically show you guys one example of a workflow of how you could use this. So we're going to create and track some tables using the normal UI flow, and then just drop the metadata. And then we're going to recreate some metadata in TypeScript. So yeah, I will do that. So I'm sure everybody's familiar with like creating a table regularly. Okay, so now we have this in here, right, and our table's tracked. If we go here and we basically reset the metadata. Okay, we have nothing on our metadata. I've previously created a users and posts table, and I'm just going to demo tracking these. So the setup that I have here is on my left, this script is just being continuously watched by NodeMon, and it writes out to my metadata tables.yaml file using one of the convert to metadata utility functions. And then this is the output of my tables.yaml. And then what's happening down here is that this is another watcher that's just continuously running metadata apply on every change. So basically if we start, then I can, press space and get autocomplete. Okay, so I say table, and then I say name, users, and then schema public. And then that by itself should be enough. It'll run the metadata apply, track that there. That should be enough to just base populate the table so you can see it popping up there. but let's go ahead and try to add like some select permissions. So we've got nothing. So then what I'll do is I will do select permissions. And then I'll say the role will be user. And then permission will be columns, let's say email. And let's say, what is this? Filter where ID equals Hasura user ID. So save that, and then that'll dump that over here into metadata.yaml, apply it. And then if we go back and reload, then now I have this user role here with this select permission where ID equals Hasura user ID. And then for the sake of time, I'm just going to copy paste this to show you setting up like relationships. So basically what I've done the same thing is like we have this users table here, and we have the same sort of select permissions, but then I define an array relationship to say posts using a for key constraint on user's ID to public posts. And then down here, just same thing with posts, object relationships. This is, you know, many to one, one to many relationship using for key constraint on user ID. And I think that should work. So that will spit all that out there and then apply the metadata. Then if I reload, then you should see in the relationships that I have posts here. And then in my posts, it has a user. And then, yeah, you can modify all this stuff. So we could say in the relationship to posts, it could be like, you know, not posts. And yeah, so that's pretty much the demo. To kind of wrap up, if anybody cares, the way that it works is that there's this TypeScript script, and it basically just takes like a language input, and so you configure it, and then you run it, and it generates all these output files. And so we have this typed SDK for you know, what I assume are most languages that people are going to write. And then we have these really cool convenience methods. So you can generate a text diff or a structural diff, and also write these to files. They're just built-in methods. So this allows you to version your metadata diffs and commit them to source just like you would with migrations. And these SDKs also have runtime parsers and validators that when you try to load JSON or YAML files, it'll do a runtime validation and let you know if they're valid. So yeah, so use cases for these. You can create custom tooling for dynamic metadata interaction. We have some users where they have permissions and roles that are kind of generated and revoked programmatically. And having a typed SDK for them is going to dramatically improve this interaction. You could write DSLs and utility classes for working with metadata while also benefiting from the types. You can kind of simplify working with metadata by just abstracting it and composing the statements into these reusable functions. Like I mentioned, you can version control, or if you're working in a more secure environment, then you can audit changes to metadata and basically any possibility you can imagine. We're super excited to see what you guys come up with. And that's what I got.
Just to add to that,
Tanmai.
it's going to be, sorry, just to quickly add to that, it's going to be, this is going to be very useful, especially if you have like, you know, you have a really large number of tables, or you have and you have like a particular onboarding process. Let's say you're in a multi-tenant environment, you need to create a new role for a new tenant that you've gotten or something like that, right? And you want to apply a base set of permissions to for a particular new role that you added for all of these tables, right? So you can kind of create these mappings and manipulate them and create like loops and whatnot to generate that metadata very, very easy, very, very easily, right? So all of those things kind of become possible. And the nice thing is that once we have like these TypeScript definitions that we'll add to the repo officially, and a JSON schema thing, it can be used to auto-generate like these type definitions in any other language as well. So so all of that becomes easy. It's already possible today to kind of keep having version control along with the console and whatnot. But then just being able to kind of selectively take any particular part of that metadata, right? Like maybe you want to keep using the UI for like the remote schema stuff, or using the for the actions.graphql stuff and whatnot, right? And you only want to kind of customize the tables.yaml thing. It's totally up to you. You can customize like any part of like any part of the metadata, right, that you want to own and that you want to control. So our plan is to basically have the SDK definitions officially added, hopefully within the 1.3 release itself. It's not really going to change anything on the from a Hasura feature standpoint or a server API standpoint. Nothing much changes. It's kind of purely build time tooling, and so hopefully we'll be able to add these. We'll be able to add these things quite quickly to the repo so that you can kind of start building your own tools and whatnot on top of this. But yeah, that's basically it. And we'll keep you posted on how and as soon as that comes out. So I think we'll create an issue and then you can subscribe to that issue. I think we forgot to kind of create an issue so that you can subscribe to it. But as soon as that happens, you'll be notified of when that happens, of when it goes live.
Okay, thank you, Gavin and Tanmai. So if you have any questions, by the way, you can just ask in the chat and somebody from the team will be happy to answer your questions. So next we'll have a quick update on HasuraCon. So if you've joined our last community call or if you follow us on Twitter, you know that we're hosting our first user conference. It's just 1 week away. So if you haven't registered yet, you should definitely do it now here on this website. Probably someone will post the link in the chat as well. So we'll have 3 workshops conducted by the Hasura team. One will be about enterprise-grade GraphQL authorization. One will be an architecture workshop, and the other one will be about scaling Hasura. Then we'll have some amazing speakers and talks. The agenda will go live later today or tomorrow. And once you register, you will be able to add the sessions to your calendar. So the first 2 days of talks will be about modeling Hasura for enterprise systems and different users and companies who did exactly this. And the third day will be about how users use Hasura with different frameworks. And we have a lot of them. We have Next.js, Flutter, React Native, and many more. So again, if you haven't registered, it's free. You can just register on this website. Then I will move on to open source contributions. We published our digest of the month of May, and I wanted to quickly say I announced the issue about migrating the Hasura console from JavaScript to TypeScript in the last community call, and we've had over 30 pull requests since then, which is amazing. A lot of them have been merged, a lot of them are in review. So that's very cool. Also, same goes for Actions Code Gen. In the meantime, we've added a lot of new code gens for Actions, as you can see here. And we have a list of issues with other frameworks that we want to add. So if you're interested in contributing, I will share the link to this digest just in a minute. Then you can just go here and go on this issue. Also, for the first time, we're plugging the server contribution. So if you are excited about contributing with Haskell, we have a few open issues for the Hasura server, so these 4. If you have any questions or if something is not clear, you can always comment on the issue or get in touch with us over Discord or Twitter or email, whatever is best for you. And also we have, for the Learn tutorials, some issues that are open, mostly about the versions that we need to change for some of these Learn tutorials. Again, if you need help, get in touch and we'll be happy to help you out. So now it's time for our community demo. Avi, if you're ready, you can go ahead with your actions talk.
Awesome. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Great. I'll just share my screen. Pasted a link in, can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Cool. I pasted a link in the chat, which is sort of the application I've been working on. And thanks again for the Hasura team to sort of let me talk about the game that I've been working on, and also dive in a little bit about actions and how I use them here. So it's live at the site, you can check it out. But for now, I'll just do a quick demo of the game to understand what it is, and then I'll jump into sort of the authentication requirements and how I used actions to solve those. So here you can host the game. Anybody can join the game with some code. And you can only join the game while it's in this lobby state. Someone can even join with a link. So that's cool. We'll quickly fill out some different users here, representing different players in the game. This is a sort of a guessing game where users input different words and then they have to sort of have different rules to guess them while it's their turn. So you can configure any settings here. All this is actually based off sort of a top level subscription that anytime someone makes a change here. So if I say, let's say I say, you know, 2 cards instead of 1, that should appear here as well. Not 21. Okay, cool. So now that everyone's here, you might be able to, you know, submit some words. Again, it's all based on a subscription. API, cool. All on theme of Hasura. Cool. So one interesting thing is, so I can dive into the authentication bit now a little bit once the game has been sort of set up, is I wanted to just show that behind the scenes, we have in local storage, we're storing this client UUID. You'll notice that we didn't do any sort of sign in this entire time. And the reason is because kind of wanted to make it super lightweight, and there's not really any sensitive data here, but still don't want any Zoom bomber type folks jumping into someone's game while the game is being played. So you can only join the game while it's in the lobby state, or you have to get a special link from the host if you want to join, if you for some reason fall out. And so this UUID here functions as a sort of password, like a username and password combination, such that if you have this, you can always sort of leave your, like exit the game and join back in at any time. So kind of an example of that would be, let's say like if I accidentally close my browser and now I want to get back, well, I can easily either just paste in the link again. It's because I have that token in local storage, so I just refresh back, or I can type in the code again, which is DTUT, and I can get back in the game that way. So now what's also interesting from a authentication or authorization from an authentication standpoint is you'll notice that there's this JWT token that sort of verifies that you're a player for this game, and you then therefore have access to take a turn or make mutations, etc. But there's a chance that you know, this is in an incognito window, and I could completely leave this sort of screen here. And I'm like, okay, I want to actually get back in the game. Hopefully people aren't playing with incognito windows, but this happens actually quite a bit on like mobile phones and things like that. And so I jump back in, I'm like, I want to join the game, but in my sort of local storage here, I've lost all the information that I previously had. So there's no sort of user IDs or anything like that. So I want to try and join back this game. So it says, hey, we can't seem to figure out which player you are. So what you need to do is actually ask the host, which is this sort of simulating in this browser here, to send you a specific link. So they can say, okay, I want to send the link for user 2. This actually has that specific kind of username password combination. You can click that in the browser, and now I'm back in the game. So that's pretty cool. And from here, you can kind of split into 2 teams, and it's a sort of guessing game where, you know, if this is team red, the other person on the team red will be trying to guess words that appears for this player using the rules of taboo. And so there's different rounds, but I won't get into that. And I'll jump instead into how sort of this is all set up from like the action standpoint. So what that sort of looks like is the ability to join a game. And this is requiring a custom sort of action because while it's probably possible to generate a JWT token and JSON in Postgres, it's definitely not a great developer experience. And so what I want to do here is allow any player to join the game with a certain game ID and their client UID. That's the token that I showed before that kind of serves as a user password combination. And in return, they should get back their user ID and then the JWT token. And so this is hooked up to an action-based endpoint, which is configured in the GraphQL server with sort of a link to basically a site hosted on 3000 or a server hosted on port 3001, which is where I actually have an Express TypeScript server running. And so this join game will be the endpoint that I'm hitting there. So cool, this looks great. And I'll go ahead and show you what that sort of code looks like in this project. So at the very top level, I have a GraphQL server, which is Hasura, and then the action server, which is the sort of endpoint where the endpoint is hosted for this custom action. And so if I jump into this action server, the entry point here is a server.ts, which I actually love that there's now a kit for Express TypeScript. Before 2 weeks ago, that didn't exist, I don't think. So I kind of wrote this on my own. Basically, you would hit some route. So say you went to join game specifically, and that would jump into this sort of function here. And all this is doing is basically giving me the ability to write some sort of custom business logic to decide whether I need to either look up a player in the game or insert a new player for that game. And so what I do here is, you know, reading this through is like through the request, you'll notice, remember that you get the game ID and client UID. That's what's coming in through the action. So I parse that out of the input. The first thing I do is I want to see if there is a player that exists for the game. So I look up sort of that player. And this is a mutation actually that using GraphQL code gen, you know, I can write these GraphQL queries, look up player for a game, and insert player for a game, and then actually generate the types for those different GraphQL operations, and then reference them and make sure my variables are typed, etc. Variables for the mutation or the query. So if I don't find a player for the game, then I actually want to try and insert a new player for the game because this is like a new person that has joined the game. And after all that is said and done, so those are 2 different mutations that kind of run conditionally, which would be hard to pull off in Hasura, like just from the client side, especially if I wanted to contain this logic. And then after all that, I kind of get a player ID, and if I don't have one, throw an error. If I do, I want to try to create this JWT with a certain expiration date and some other sort of logic here, and then return that back to the browser, which then can be used in sort of authenticating who I am in this game. Yeah, that's pretty much what's happening in the use of actions here, and kind of in the future. What I like about actions in general, before sort of what used to happen when I used Hasura previously, is that we would set up a remote schema with like a Lambda server that then would kind of do a lot of the same things that the actions are giving you for free. And what's exciting is that I'm sharing now types between, you know, my main app which sit side by side. This application is the React app that's being used to power the front end and this action server, and it's all in TypeScript. So now, as other developers join and sort of ramp up on this project, it's very easy for them to navigate because everything's in TypeScript, and sort of sharing types between the front end and the back end. In this particular case, is a custom action back end. So I'll pause there. I'm not sure if that was clear or not, but I think we might be out of time. So if there are any questions, you can paste them in the chat, or I can answer them as well.
Thank you so much, Avi.
Thanks, Avi. This is super awesome. Do you? I remember you mentioned that you've open sourced the game as well, right? Have you?
I'm on mute. Yeah, I actually have, and so you can go to GitHub. I'll paste the link in the channel as well. And I think there's a lot of useful sort of like bits of tooling and sort of setup here about using TypeScript, Apollo. So the stack here is Material UI, TypeScript, React, Apollo, GraphQL, Hasura, Postgres, obviously. And I think there's a lot of good sort of tooling sort of bits in there that you can check out, borrow, copy into your own project. I think it'll be helpful. And in the next like maybe 2 hours, actually, the whole thing will be Dockerized. So it's be really easy to spin up the project and sort of play with it from there.
Oh, that sounds awesome. Yeah.
It's amazing. Amazing. Thank you so much, Avi. And I've just learned that now the agenda for the Hasura conference is online. So you can check it out here. I'm sure Rajoshi will share the link in the chat. So yes, you can go here through the agenda and add these talks to your calendars, the ones that you're interested in, talks for 3 days. Yes, so we already come to the end of this call. As usual, we always want to make our community call better. So if you have any feedback, please go to bit.ly/communitycallfeedback and give us feedback about this call, and also let us know what you want to hear or see in the next call, because we always look at this feedback and we try to adapt this to your wishes. Also, if you build something amazing like Avi, it would be very cool if you would show this in one of our next community calls. This could be a project that you build with Hasura or a contribution that you build for Hasura, anything really. Please fill out the form at bit.ly/communitycalldemo, and we would love to have you in one of our next community calls. Otherwise, I want to say thank you to my colleagues who prepared these demos and talks. And also thank you again to Avi for not only building this cool game, but also presenting it in our community call. The next community call will be on the 25th of June. We'll move it from Wednesday to Thursdays now. And you can already register at the link that's pasted below. Otherwise, I hope to see you next month, and have a nice evening or day. Bye.
Bye, everyone. See you folks in the workshops that are happening next week. If you're interested, do check them out. And otherwise, see you in the talks at HasuraCon, or otherwise see you online and in the next call. Bye, everyone.
Yeah. Bye.